I'm joined now, as we are every week after Bills games, by my broadcast partner on the Bills radio network, former center Eric Wood, who's also the host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. And Eric Wood's appearance is presented by Campbell's Chunky Soup. Big, craveable favorites collide in Chunky Soup's new Mac line, featuring flavors like Buffalo-style Chicken Mac, Chili Dog Mac, and Beefy Mac. Stock up for game day now at your local Wegmans. Chunky Soup that eats like a meal. All right out of the box here, Eric, I want to ask you, what were you more surprised by? The fact that the Bills largely ran just 2 run plays for most of the game, or were you more surprised that Pittsburgh at no point in time effectively adjusted to stop it?
Yeah, I would say I'm mainly surprised that they weren't able to stop it and force the Bills to do different things off of it. I mean, I continually throughout the broadcast was saying, okay, we're showing them the same motion, the same formation, and the same play. At some point, something's coming off of it. There's going to be a play action. We did see Josh throw out of it a couple times to the backside slant, but that was just an old school RPO there in that situation. That was the run play called with just a slant on the backside of it. But to me, surprising that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense could not make adjustments. And, we could talk about, 2 backup tackles on the Bills offensive line. They maybe weren't as worried about the receiving core with the Bills with Kincaid and Palmer out. Those guys in Alec Anderson and Ryan Vandermark, they played snaps for the Bills. Vandermark started games. Alec Anderson's got a ton of snaps, playing in a similar role that they had him play for most of the game yesterday in that, blocking on the edge role. So I thought those guys stepped up admirably. And, this is a Pittsburgh team organization that's always prided itself on being tougher than you, being more physical than you. And that was disheartening yesterday for their organization. And being in that stadium, I know you could hear it on TV as well, Steve, but being in that stadium yesterday, it almost was lifeless in the second half. And then it turned from lifeless to a bunch of boo birds out there.
Yeah, and when a team has a day like that, as Steelers did in their own building, how much can you take away? I think it says more about the Steelers than it does about the Bills.
It could. I mean, this is the best rushing offense in football. We have enough sample size through 12 games now where it's not an anomaly that this is likely the best rushing team in the NFL. You combine the running backs and especially James Cook with the offensive line that they have, the way the tight ends can block, and then also the receivers, and then you combine some scheme advantages that Joe Brady and Aaron Kromer have been able to create. It's likely the best rushing offense in the entire NFL. And so, yes, it's a black eye for the Steelers, and it says a lot about, kind of how they built their team. And to me, this looks like an organization that kind of needs to bottom out. They've gotten so old on the defensive side of the football. And then on the offensive side of the football, you try to put a Band-Aid on it by bringing Aaron Rodgers in after you brought in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields a year ago. And it just doesn't look like a recipe for success. Now, they could still mess around and get in the playoffs this year. I don't want to say mainly, but it helps that Lamar Jackson was hurt for part of the year. Joe Burrow was hurt for part of the year. The Browns stink. They didn't have to play the first place schedule. That helps. But to me, this team looks like a team on the decline, and it doesn't surprise me that they started better than they'll likely finish the season based upon the age that they have in that building.
We saw the Bills kind of get a spark on offense after Josh got hit late on the slide near the Bills' sideline by Patrick Queen. Some fans have expressed a bit of a concern today that it was another slow start for the offense that appeared to be lacking mojo until that play happened. And we've seen that happen before, and it's usually been in a road environment, whether you want to look at the Atlanta game in Week 6, not a lot of mojo on offense, slow start. Miami, no points in the first half, slow start by the offense, not a lot of mojo. How does this offense, despite their encouraging output on the ground this past week, get off to a better start, particularly when they are on the road, and bring the requisite energy and urgency to the game right from the start?
Yeah, I understand the fans' concerns. To me, it's not as much of an energy concern from the start. It's an execution from the start. Execution generally brings energy. It's more fun when you're executing at a high level. To me, when they've struggled at times on the road, it's getting behind the sticks, whether that's penalties, whether that's lost yardage plays early in drives that stalls them out offensively. Against Houston, first drive, I believe it was the first drive of the game when James Cook goes down and scores that long touchdown. And, we didn't say, yeah, they started slow energy wise against them. But even yesterday in the first half, when you're playing without Palmer, Kincaid, it's going to be harder to pass protect with two new tackles in there. You get those offsides penalties. You get a couple negative yardage plays. You get an interception by Josh, and it leaves you with 3 points. The margin for error with those guys out and the limitations right now in the passing game hasn't necessarily given you much wiggle room. So when you hurt yourself, especially on the road, with penalties or lost yardage plays early in drives, and you're not able to run the football as effectively, then you see these draws stall out. And I did see, it's going to give you an edge when something like that happens to your quarterback. And that sometimes is great. And other times, if everyone comes out guns a-blazing from the start, hair on fire like a madman, you might not play your best football. You might play undisciplined. You might do some things you're not supposed to out there schematically, technique-wise, if you're not playing kind of in that sweet spot of intensity level. But I say all that. I understand, and visibly that's what it appears at times. I think, to me, the life gets sucked out of them offensively when they have the penalties and turnovers and lost yardage plays, and then the other team gets the tee off on them, and that's when they become a pretty pedestrian offense.
Certainly this game played out the way it did, and the passing game of the Bills wasn't really called on to carry the day. But when that day comes, and it may well come this Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals, what do you think needs to happen, and what should it look like?
Yeah, I think in recent weeks, especially when you look at the Buccaneers game and then at times yesterday, some of the creativity in the passing game has helped, whether it's been design passes to running backs, some confusion in the backfield. We saw a comeback to Brandon Cooks yesterday. We haven't seen a lot of comeback routes on the outside throughout the season. It seems like we're getting some more variety, which can help this offense. Play action certainly has been a strong suit of the offense the entire year, but that requires you to stay in, manageable down and distance, or else the play action is not going to be much of a fake if you're sitting there at 2nd and 11 or a penalty backs you up. But, hopefully, with both guys limited last week, you get Kincaid back, you get Palmer back. Hopefully those guys back in the lineup can boost this passing game.
Looking on the defensive side of the ball, Coach McDermott was asked about Shaq Thompson's performance. He said he did a solid job at the middle linebacker spot. He led the team in tackles with 9 and brought a physical edge that we have seen from him before for this defense. And Coach McDermott even shared post-game that Thompson got up in front of the defensive unit at the end of the week and demanded their best performance of the season. And I would argue that was probably the best tackling performance we have seen from the defense this season. More often than not, the first guy to the ball got the ball carrier on the ground. We didn't see plays leak out for extra yardage due to missed tackles. Sure, you want to give Shaq Thompson some credit there, but as far as gap integrity and tackling, it was probably the best performance of the season defensively for this Bills team.
Yeah, we've been talking about his consistent play all year, but yesterday's just further example that at the second level of defense right now, whether it's injuries or whatever the case may be, he's our most physical, consistent linebacker. And when you talk about, performances like yesterday, Carolina, those have been some of our better rushing defense performance second half.
All right, I think we lost
Robert Bernard got hurt at times that he's been in the game.
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back.
You're back. Yeah, he popped out for just a second, Eric. Go ahead.
Yeah, technology's fun. But when you look at the games and the times he's been in there, that's been when this Bills rush defense has been at its best. And Some of the concern was hamstring injury at training camp. Hamstring popped up again. He's coming off an Achilles. Can he play the full season? Well, now we're in the final stretch. I think he's got to be out there. I mean, and maybe it's a rotational thing where on running, run situations, first and 10, second and medium, he's out there and you platoon him. I'm not sure how that goes. Certainly Terrell Bernard's played at a high level, a very high level when he's been healthy here in Buffalo. So I'm not saying you take the captain off the field of your defense, but man, if I'm looking at the tape, I'm saying this guy's got to be out there and he's got to play meaningful snaps for this defense because it's different when he's out there.
What changes this week against Cincinnati? Obviously, a completely differently built team, built a little bit more like the Bills than the Steelers were. What do you expect in Orchard Park this week?
Well, this defense is going to have to come to play. This is a Bengals team that's found some life with Joe Burrow coming back. Heck, the defense is bottom of the league in almost every statistical category, and then they play against the Ravens last week, Thanksgiving night, and they didn't look very bad that night. Started off weak and then, put their foot down and were able to shut down the Ravens offense for majority of the night. And so, a guy, when the best player on your team comes back and you give this organization some hope, the defense played better as well. And so this is a Bengals team that finds themselves, I believe, 2 games out of first place, and they're going to come in hungry. And this is a Bengals team that's, with Joe Burrow's, had our number. And that won't be lost on many of these guys in this locker room that have played against them. But they got to be buttoned up against this Bengals team because a lot better than their 4-net record would show you. And defensively, they got a couple guys that can rush the passer, and they've been gashed this season on the ground as well. I believe they've given up around or maybe even over 5,000 yards on the season so far, which is almost unheard of. But this is a team with some new life now with Burrow back at quarterback and us beating the Steelers and them beating the Ravens last week. They find themselves back in it.
One last thing on the run game, Eric. James Cook had his 7th 100-yard rushing day of the season. That leads the league, and he's now just 82 yards behind Jonathan Taylor for the rushing lead in the NFL. He's got New England, the number 2 run defense on the schedule. He's got Philadelphia, which can be a good run defense, although most would say they've underachieved this year. And then there are some lesser run defenses like Cincinnati this week. What do you think Cook's chances are to flirt with the rushing title here the rest of the way?
I certainly think he has a great chance, especially when you consider we have 3 home games that are going to be cold, likely some wind. We're going to have to likely establish the ground game. And then you play against the Browns at their place. And, you're probably not trying to drop back 40 times going against Myles Garrett, who's going after the single season sack record himself. And so, he's definitely got a shot at it. To me, I love the way I know James Cook set a personal record for most carries in a game yesterday, but I also like the way that they mixed in Davis at times yesterday to take a little bit of the load off of him. And that happens when you have 42 minutes of time of possession. You're going to have to get some other guys in there, but very impressed by him. I've been impressed by him the entire season. I know he had the fumble yesterday. That was the low light of the game for him, but just the way that he's able to be a combination of vision and speed and physicality at the contact point. I mean, he's the real deal. And you can't run duo 30 times in a football game if you don't have a running back with great vision. He's reading it perfectly on the front side. He kicks it outside. He goes and attacks corners. And then when everyone over pursues, he comes out the back door. Duo is one of those plays where it can look like different plays and it looks like it's hitting in different spots. It's the same blocking scheme for us. It's just where the defense fits it and how the running back wants to take it. And gosh, he's good at that. I mean, we've over the years, everyone said Le'Veon Bell was the best to run duo in the league. And I don't know, we might be talking about James Cook of the past, 10 or 15 years of being able to just have that vision to be able to run the same play over and over and make the defense pay.
One of the things we saw in this game, and you spoke about it a little bit, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, and James Cook, all getting their opportunities, but also 2 running backs on the field at once, and throwing them the football. Now, certainly not every matchup and every defense is going to call for that or be vulnerable to it. What are your thoughts about that going forward?
Yeah, with Kincaid and Palmer out, you're looking at ways you can get your best skill guys out on the field. And so I believe that's part of the reason for that in the game plan yesterday. But, this running back room's stacked, and Ty Johnson's a heck of a football player. I mean, he truly is. He's in a crowded backfield, but he plays a vital role with the way he plays on third downs. And I like the way they mixed him in yesterday in some normal down and distances that give teams something else to prepare for, have different packages within a game plan. He picked up 2 first downs in the game for us, catching passes, and then also had the run on 4th and 1 where he's lined up at fullback, which is a nice wrinkle from Joe Brady. And so, as critical as we've all been of Joe Brady and some situational play calls, I thought yesterday he was excellent throughout this game.
Eric, thanks for the time as always, and we'll catch you up here in Orchard Park on the weekend.
Okay, sounds good. Have a great week, guys.